Welcome to Systems Check with Naina Rana. Welcome to Systems Check. My name is Naina, and welcome back. You're probably listening to this in your car, or on a walk, or in your earbuds while you pretend to be somewhere else. Wherever you are, I need you to actually be here for this one. I want you to do something a little weird. Say your number out loud, even if you're alone. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is completely drained and 10 is fully charged, what is your battery right now? I'll give you a minute. Now, say it out loud. I'll wait. If you said a 3 or below, I'm really glad you're here. If you said a 7 or above, stay with me, because high numbers can be deceiving. Some of the most depleted people I've ever worked with were running on an enthusiastic 8, functioning beautifully, falling apart quietly. Today, we are going deep on the Systems Check framework developed by me. What is it, where it came from, and how to actually implement it into your daily life, not as a concept, but as a practice. But before we get into the framework, we need to talk about what we're actually dealing with. There's a version of burnout that doesn't look like falling apart. It looks like showing up, getting things done, being the strong one, being the reliable one. It looks like functioning, but not actually being okay. And for a long time, that was me. Burnout is all-encompassing. It is something that cannot be ignored. It is something that when it fully takes hold, you cannot just push through. And I say that as someone who spent years trying. Burnout isn't one thing, it is many things. It makes you feel isolated. It makes you feel as if the work you once loved has been hollowed out. Sometimes the cynicism gets so heavy that you start becoming a version of yourself you couldn't have imagined, and then feeling guilty about that too. And I need you to hear it, really hear it, before we go anywhere else. As a disabled wheelchair user, when people tell me, I understand, my honest internal response is usually, you understand, but not fully understand. So when I say I get it, I mean that specifically, not academically. A few years ago, if you looked at my life from the outside, I was doing all the right things, building my practice, helping clients, growing professionally, checking every box. But internally, something wasn't working. And the hardest part was that I couldn't point to one obvious thing, because that's how this version of burnout operates. It hides inside the competence. All right, let's get into it. We've all had that moment, the frantic, heart-racing scramble. Oh, you're digging through your bag, pulse pounding, because this meeting starts in exactly 60 seconds, and your laptop is at 2%. You find the outlet, you plug it in, your device starts charging immediately. But your body is still running on fumes. And nobody in that room can tell the difference because you smile. You open your notebook and you execute. We call that normal. It's not normal. It's a nervous system strain, and often an organizational system strain. The S in systems stands for signals. And signals are exactly what they sound like. It's the warning lights on your dashboard, the symptoms, the indicators, the clues your body and your environment are sending before things get critical. Personal signals sound like, I used to love this work, and now I'm just going through the motions. Or something like, I'm snapping at people for no real reason. When I finish a task, I'm already dreading the next one. Or I can't remember the last time I felt genuinely proud of something I did. Some organizational signals sound like, the people who used to speak up in meetings have gone quiet. Your most experienced colleagues are quietly updating their resumes. Morale has dropped and leadership keeps calling it a tough quarter. Sound familiar? Both are data. The question is never whether the signals are being sent. The question is whether anyone, including yourself, has learned to read them. Your body has been sending signals long before you hit that wall, long before the Sunday dread started, long before you stopped remembering why you chose this work in the first place. Those signals aren't weakness. That's information. The questions to sit with here are simple. What am I noticing? What has changed, even subtly, in the last few months? What warning signs am I actively choosing to overlook? These are questions I always, and I still, ask myself, and you should too. You check your device battery. You plug it in before it hits 0. When did you last do that for yourself? When did your organization last do that for its people? Because of my condition, I have never had the luxury of ignoring my body and calling it productivity. My system tells me very clearly, and sometimes very painfully, when I'm past capacity. And over time, I realized something. That wasn't a limitation, that was an education. Once you've identified the signals, the next step is understanding how your nervous system is actually responding to stress, and whether you're operating inside or outside your window of tolerance. The Y in systems stands for your nervous system, not your schedule, not your workload, your nervous system. Because your stress response has a pattern, and until you can map that pattern, you can't regulate it. You're just reacting, and reacting is exhausting. Interpersonal neurobiology, which is a wonderful, fascinating subject I would encourage you to read about, tells us that your nervous system was shaped by your relationships, the early ones, the environments that taught you whether it was safe to slow down, whether rest was allowed, whether your needs were an inconvenience or something worth honoring. So when I say your system, I mean the whole thing. The body you're in, the history you carry, and the patterns you've built to survive environments that maybe didn't make space for you to just be enough as you were. I started noticing my own patterns. Low energy days, high energy days. I stopped fighting my body's rhythm and started working with it. And maybe more importantly, I stopped spending my low days punishing myself for not doing more. Do you remember a time you did that? Where you had a hard day and spent the whole thing beating yourself up for having it? Here's what I want you to hear in that. I'm a wheelchair user who spent years trying to work like an able-bodied person. 50-hour weeks, genuine shame when I couldn't keep up. And I thought that was resilience. Some of you are doing the exact same thing, not because of a physical condition, or maybe because of physical condition, but because you are a human being trying to operate like a machine. And machines don't have nervous systems, but you do. Your nervous system has a fingerprint. Some people recharge around others, some recharge alone, some need movement, some need quiet. The problem isn't that you're burned out. The problem is that you've been using someone else's owner's manual. Let me take you into a very specific version of my life. I call it the overclocked version of me. I was on the sales team at an IT company, in front of a laptop for hours, back-to-back meetings, an always-on culture. I'm wondering if this sounds familiar for you. I'd arrive at 9 a.m., check in with colleagues, and immediately start moving. Customer relationship management work, data uploads, sales routing, basically anything that needed structure. I stabilized it. I was the conduit between marketing, developers, solutions, and I was good at it. People trusted me. They relied on me. I was the reliable one. Look at me, I already sound very proud about that. It really did matter to me. In some ways, it still matters. More than I understood at that time. But underneath that, something else was happening. Here's a distinction I want you to hold on to. High performers are often trained to recover after they break. Sustainable performers recover before they break. The second S in systems stands for sustainable pace. And sustainable pace is not about doing less, not at all. It's about lowering your ambition. It's not about lowering your ambition. It's about finding a rhythm that allows you to keep going without breaking yourself in the process. It's structure. It's time blocks. It's prioritization. It's a 5-minute buffer between meetings, so your brain isn't immediately context switching. Batching similar tasks. Asking, genuinely asking, where something ranks before you drop everything for it. I've done that myself. Still have to remind myself not to today. These aren't productivity hacks, not at all. These are the difference between a career that lasts and one that quietly dismantles itself while you're busy being impressive. Now, before we go further, I want you to actually feel what we've been talking about. Because you cannot think your way out of a flooded nervous system, you can breathe your way out, though. Let's try something together. Wherever you are, if it's safe to do so, I want you to try this. So, we're going to do a little breathing exercise. Inhale through your nose for 4 counts. Hold briefly for 2 counts. And then exhale through for 6 counts. I'm going to pause here, and why don't you try for 3 more. Great. Would you like to do another breathing exercise? Okay, let's get to it. If you notice that we didn't solve your burnout just now, we simply sent your nervous system a message. You're safe enough to slow down. Before meetings at the corporate company I used to work at, I used to do a short breathing exercise before those meetings to calm my nervous system and just be prepared for the responsibilities that I had. That message, repeated consistently, is the beginning of a sustainable pace. It's not a grand gesture. The small daily signal that you are worth protecting. The question to carry here is, how can I continue doing meaningful work without consistently exceeding my capacity? Now, how do I do more? How do I keep going sustainably? These are the questions to continue to ask yourself and to then implement behaviors, tasks, ways of doing things that will break up your day. How many tabs do you currently have open on your laptop right now? A lot, probably. I know my laptop currently, if I open it, there will be maybe 20 tabs open. We call it multitasking. In fact, sometimes we celebrate it. We put it on our resumes. But it's not multitasking. It's overclocking. In tech, optimization is efficiency. Overclocking is pushing a system past its safe operating limits to get temporary high performance. It works until it doesn't. The T in system stands for team architecture. And here's what I want you to understand. Overclocking is rarely just a personal decision. It is usually a structural one. Who else carries this load? What does everything look like when you're out sick for a week? If the answer is, it all falls apart, that is not a you problem. That's an architecture problem, an organizational problem. And you cannot self-care your way out of a broken organization. I need you to hear that clearly, so I'll say it again. You cannot self-care your way out of a broken organization. I need you to hear that clearly. Even the most capable, committed people struggle with expectations. Unclear workloads are unevenly distributed, or the team culture quietly punishes honesty about capacity. I remember working and genuinely not being sure sometimes who was responsible for what was the timeline, who I reported to on, and sometimes I was too anxious to ask. Because what if it was obvious and I just didn't know? Everything felt urgent. Everything felt like a high priority. And when everything is a high priority, nothing is. That's not a personal feeling. That's a system without architecture. We overclock for one reason. We've tied our self-worth to our output. If performance drops, we think we are the problem. So we push ourselves harder until our nervous system breaks. 8 out of 10 times, in my experience working with clients, everyone on the team is feeling the exact same way, carrying the same weight in the same silence, and you think it's just you. It's not. Eventually, I quit that job. And I thought I would feel better. I didn't. Because burnout doesn't live in the job, it lives in the system you built around the job. You know, I still had school at that time, still had financial pressure, still had exhaustion, and now no structure holding any of it together. It got worse before it got better. Leaving doesn't always mean healing. The E in systems stands for energy recovery. And I want to be very clear about what that means, because it's not taking a vacation. It's not a few days off. When stress has been chronic, recovery requires intentionally rebuilding your physical, emotional, and mental capacity over time. It's a process. It definitely is. Energy recovery is a decision made before the system is already failing. It means deciding in advance, at what signal do I stop? At what threshold do I ask for help? What parts of me actually need recovery right now, and am I addressing those parts? Or just stopping working and calling it rest? There's a difference between restoring energy and simply stopping work, which is kind of what I did. One of my clients said something that stopped me mid-session. I asked how she managed her intense corporate load. She looked at me and said, "I don't push through, Nina. I make sure I utilize my resources so I never have to push through." I sat with that for a long time, because that is exactly where burnout lives, in the gap between high demand and insufficient resources. She hadn't eliminated the demand, she had built the infrastructure to meet it. And that, hearing that as a clinician, sounded so cool. Now, I want to do something a little unconventional here. I want you to pause this episode. Go get some water or a snack or both. Step away for a few minutes. I'm serious. I know that sounds strange coming from a podcast, but you'll understand why when you come back. See you in a few. Now, I want to do something a little unconventional here. I want you to pause this episode. Go get some water or a snack or both. Step away for a few minutes. I'm serious. I know that sounds strange coming from a podcast, but you'll understand why when you come back. I'll be here. Go ahead. Welcome back. That break, that small, slightly awkward, completely necessary break is exactly what we're talking about in the M section, because your maintenance is what prevents burnout from taking root in the first place. Recovery isn't the finish line. Without ongoing maintenance, most people slowly drift right back into the same patterns that led to burnout in the first place. M stands for maintenance. And maintenance means regularly checking your workload, your energy, your relationships, and your responsibility before problems become crises. It is not a reward for finishing, it is a condition for continuing. I'm going to share a short story with you, something that really does encompass what maintenance is really all about. My brother and I worked at the same company for years. We had a monthly sibling lunch, wings, no work talk. It was sacred. Except we broke it. Most of the time. Maybe every single time. Something would come up. Wings were pushed aside. Work first. At that time, it felt normal. Even a little noble, honestly. Like we were both so dedicated. As a clinician now, I look back and think those wings, those lunches should have been weekly. And they should have been completely untouchable. Maintaining your relationships outside of work is one part of untangling your identity from your output. When the only place you feel purposeful is at your desk, everything else starts to feel like an interruption. And that's when the system starts silently failing. I had a client, dream job. He'd worked toward it for years. He finished a major project, something he had poured his entire self into. And when it was done, I remember in our session, he looked at me and said, "I'm done, but what's next?" I stopped him. I said, "Wait, you just finished something remarkable. You should celebrate it." He couldn't do it. He was already moving. He described his work life as a factory line, one thing after another. And this was his dream job. That moment told me everything. When the system is broken, it doesn't matter how meaningful the work is, you will still feel empty at the end of it. Burnout isn't about hating your job. Sometimes it's a system that doesn't let you actually feel the work you love. Maintenance isn't glamorous. It's hydration, it's a walk after a hard session, it's maybe wings with your brother. You should protect that because it matters. It's not the vacation once a year. It's these consistent, small things you do every day that keeps your entire system running. What restores you consistently, not occasionally? This last section is for everyone, but especially for emerging current leaders. I need you to hear this one, not just for yourself, but also for the people around you. Everything we talked about today has been about you, your signals, your nervous system, your pace, your recovery, your maintenance. And that was necessary. You genuinely cannot pour from an empty system. That's not a cliche, that's biology. The final S in systems asks a completely different question. It asks, what are you passing down? When you overclock yourself and call it leadership, when you send emails at midnight and frame it as dedication, when you celebrate someone for pushing through without ever asking them what it cost them, you are not just managing your own burnout, you are teaching people what this culture expects of them. You are writing the unspoken rules, and people are reading them carefully. My sales director gave me autonomy. She asked what I thought. She let me grow into things before I even knew I was capable of them. I don't think she sat down one day and said, I'm going to steward this person. I think she just led in a way that made space. And I'm sitting here, years later, as a clinician, a speaker, a podcast host, partly because of how she treated me in that role. That's the long game of stewardship. You rarely see the return on it in real time, or maybe you don't recognize it always. I reflected on it, and I do. As a wheelchair user, I think about stewardship in a specific way. I've been in rooms where nobody thought to ask if I could get in the building. I've been in systems designed without me in mind at all, and then expected to perform inside them anyway. Stewardship also means asking, who did we not design this for? Who is carrying an invisible load that we have never once asked about? Because burnout doesn't hit everyone equally, not at all. It hits hardest where the system already has the least margin. Stewardship is the question every leader, every manager, every senior person has to carry. Am I modeling sustainability, or am I just passing down my own overclocking down the line? These are the important questions leaders, managers, if you're in any leadership role, you should be asking yourself. Let's bring this home. We started today with the version of burnout that doesn't look like falling apart. The one that looks like showing up, getting things done, being that strong one, being that reliable one. I want you to think about that version of yourself right now. The one who keeps going, keeps delivering, keeps being reliable. I'm not asking you to stop being that person. Not at all. I'm asking you to take care of that system that person runs on. Because that person, the one who shows up, deserves to actually be okay, not just look at it. I spent years overriding myself and calling it resilience. And to be honest, sometimes I do push myself. And then I have to make sure I do my own systems check to prevent myself from experiencing burnout. Proving I could keep up in a body that was telling me dearly, clearly and persistently that keeping up was never the point. And what I know now that I wish I had known then is this: the system doesn't reward you for burning out gracefully. It just moves on, and you're the one left trying to rebuild capacity you really didn't have to lose. You matter more than your output. And I know that sounds simple, but I need you to actually receive it. Not as a motivational line, but as a clinical fact. Your nervous system is not this renewable resource you can deplete indefinitely and expect to recover from fully, every time without cost. It has limits, and honoring those limits, again, is not weakness. It is the most sophisticated thing you can do. Before you move on to whatever is next, and I know you will because that's who you are, that's who I am, I want you to do one thing. Name the signal you've been ignoring. You already know what it is. It came to you somewhere in this episode, and you kept listening anyway. So if you want, go ahead and rewind and go through the entire systems check framework to see where you're at. You don't have to fix it today, but I want you to stop pretending you don't see it. That is where your systems check begins. It's not with a perfect plan, just with honesty. This has been your systems check. I'm Naina. I'll see you in the next one. And please, please, please remember to take care of your system.